Welcome to Heart Chat, Conversations of Quantum Expansion. Today's topic is Individuality within Ascension. I am Claudia Lore of EnergyLoveAndLight.com, and I am joined by the lovely Susan Smotty of SacredConnections8.com. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
I blanked for a second, so I want to make sure I got that right. Okay, so as always, before we jump into our chat, we would like to take a moment to recite a personal intention to merge both our hearts and minds and to connect with inner wisdom. So take a moment with us now and close your eyes, placing a hand upon your heart. Breathing deeply in through the nose and out through the mouth. We are relaxing, releasing, and letting go of any and all resistance. We imagine our hearts illuminating and expanding. We are simply merging heart and mind. Each breath reminds us that inner wisdom lives in the heart realm we embrace and share as service to others. Here and now, for this moment, we align our energies, our hearts, and our minds. We feel and enjoy that connection. And now it's time for us to get comfortable and enjoy this quantum conversation. I'm going to let you take it from there for a moment so I can catch my breath.
Yeah, absolutely. Breath is actually a very important thing to do. We have to remember to breathe at all times. Something that we, I think, don't really focus on is our breath, and that's, I think, one of the most, if not the most important thing in this life is to breathe.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because our topic for today is actually individuality within ascension.
Mm-hmm.
And individuality, you can't really be an individual if you're not breathing. That's one. And you have the lovely opportunity to be alive. And it is through our breath that we actually incarnate.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because I was listening to something earlier, and the person that I was listening to speak was talking about the breath and how there are yogis that make it a priority to work on their breath.
Mm-hmm.
And even bury themselves in order to learn how to breathe without using the lungs. Because
wow, that's intense.
yeah, it is. But
we're not suggesting that.
don't do that. Not yet anyway. Don't, unless you're a yogi and you're very practiced in this method. But apparently, and which I find interesting because when I had my NDE and I stopped breathing, my mom knew to use water, since water has oxygen, to
Mm-hmm.
get me to breathe again.
Wow.
So I made that connection while I was listening to this person talk about these yogis. And I found it really interesting that my mom knew to do that, and that's how she revived me.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I don't think my mother would have known to do that for sure. But this topic, as soon as you started discussing the breath, it brought me back to a couple of years ago. Well, actually, like 6 years ago now, after Hurricane Sandy here in New York City. I remember going up to our community was hit pretty hard, and I remember going up to one of the trailers where they had the emergency set up, and they were doing, I guess, some sort of work with individuals who had done a lot of the rescuing, and they were trying to help them with their mental state, because a lot of people were feeling very traumatized and confused, conflicted. People had lost homes, boats, businesses, everything. And I remember standing in the back of the room listening to them speak. And I brought up at a certain point the fact that it's important to take a moment and focus on breath and feel breath running through you. And everyone looked at me like I was crazy. So I just remember feeling very out of place for a moment because I thought that I was sharing something helpful. But even the individuals who were running the talk or the lecture, whatever you want to call it, just were like completely over their head. And I thought, how crazy is that? That even these people who are trying to advise others on how to relax and how to feel better had no recognition of breath work or anything like that as something important. So,
wow. Wow, I can't even
yeah.
imagine where their heads were at.
Yeah.
Not a judgment, but I'm just really intrigued by that completely,
Yeah.
because it's a fundamental, it's a basic, it's the most simple thing, yet the most powerful thing.
Yeah.
In my from my perspective.
Right. And there was so much adrenaline, within those, especially the first 2 weeks, because there was no gas, there was no electricity. People were trying to get water out of their houses. I mean, it was such an intense situation everywhere you turned. And to me, just that idea of reminding people, take a deep breath every couple of minutes, or every time you stop for a break, breathe, feel that, seemed like very, very basic to me, but
Yeah.
didn't catch
Yeah.
on. I did not inspire a movement for sure.
Well, perhaps it's because everyone was in shock and was suffering from PTSD that they couldn't really connect the dots,
Well, that's why I thought if I said it, that the leaders, even if it wasn't something that they specifically talked about, that maybe they would reinforce what I was saying. But yet it just sort of, they were like, oh yeah, okay, and just went on with whatever they were talking about.
Which brings me into conspiracy theory. I'm not going to go there.
All right. It's one of my favorite topics. The show will be way too long.
we're not gonna go there, but that's exactly what came up when you just said that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. But going back to the topic of the day, the individuality within ascension, we actually were inspired by pulling cards before the show.
That's right.
And I found it to be really interesting because, I mean, it's such a broad topic, I feel. And we can say so much about it. But what I find interesting is the fact that the two cards that were pulled were individuality and rebirth.
Yes. And for those of you who do not know, Susan is the card queen of New York City.
I don't know about that title, but thanks. Yeah, so
you have many decks and you love your decks and they speak to you. So
I do. I love mixing them. I'm pretty much tuned into where I need to go, and I'm just absolutely amazed every single time when the process unfolds naturally. That the cards that come out are the perfect cards all the time. And the cards are just a tool. Everything is just a tool. Everything that you're actually getting it's an energetic match.
Right.
So that's how these things work. It's just a tool in order for us to focus upon it.
Yeah, because in this 3D reality, we kind of rely on what we can see, touch, that helps us along. So
yeah. And I just find it really, really fascinating, and it just tickles my brain every time.
Okay.
It's great. So rebirth means transformation. It means being able to let go of what you thought you knew or what you have been conditioned to believe in order to embrace the new. And you can't do that unless you're breathing. That's one. And you can't do that unless you're able to surrender.
You know, all of a sudden, as you were saying that, talking about the transformation and breathing, something, a thought just popped into my head, and that was that I believe it can be stated or said that with every breath, we are transforming.
Absolutely. Every single breath. That's very true.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite words is transformation, because I feel like it's such a powerful thing, and it's not always uh, what one would say necessarily positive or negative, but it's such a powerful thing because it's development, you know.
Which is
It's
neutral.
alchemy. It's alchemy, right?
Yeah.
That's and I just find that to be
And what is
the best,
alchemy? Alchemy is expansion.
right?
It's creation.
Yeah. And what is breath but creation
Yeah. You're
too?
uh it's there's so many things running through my brain right now. I don't know which one to take right now.
Are you feeling the quantum expansion?
So much. It's funny because sometimes when we're talking or when I'm reading books on, especially on astrology, usually things are just like the synapses in my brain are going berserk. And I stop for a while to just be in that moment of gratitude to feel the synapses in my brain
Right.
shoot up, and I can feel like psh, 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 everywhere. It's amazing.
Yeah, I feel that a lot. And I think that that is one of the inspirations for the show, because when you and I talk, I feel like that happens a lot. We really get into that groove, and inspiration flies and all kinds of stuff. And I personally really wanted to share that with other people
Yeah.
and help other people maybe
And this
connect
was your
better.
idea.
Yeah.
This was your idea. Absolutely. And it's interesting that we're talking about idea. I'm bringing in some astrology here.
Okay,
It's
go for it.
interesting that, we're talking about ideas and breath and all that stuff because that's all about Mercury. Mercury is the planet that is the messenger. And Mercury has nothing. Mercury is also Hermes.
Mhm.
It really depends on where you're looking from or what language you're speaking. It's all the same thing. We're talking archetypes. When we're talking about planets, we're really talking about the archetypes of the energy of the planets. That's what we're talking about, right? So Mercury is all about the breath. Mercury is,
Wow, I did not know that.
yeah, it's
Okay.
really interesting. And Mercury is all about the brain and the nervous system. So it deals with your spine, it deals with your brain, your cerebellum. It's in charge of all of that. But the fascinating thing is that it actually is because Mercury is the breath of life that we can breathe.
Wow. Okay, I did not know any of that, so that's all news to me.
Well, and the thing is that Mercury is all about rapid movement. I think there was this saying about um, his feet fly or something like that, and it's really interesting because if you think about it, our bodies, we breathe constantly, and we're not even aware of our breath, right?
Right.
And sometimes our breath becomes very shallow. But that's what happens when our breath is shallow. It's actually increasing,
Mhm.
right? So it's short, shallow breaths, and there's a lot of them. And if you don't have a lot of them, you probably are passing out. But if you think about it, when you're having shallow breathing, you're actually not able to process information deeply.
Exactly.
You're not thinking straight because your breath is not hitting your brain. It's too shallow. It's staying mostly in like your torso area.
Right. You're in kind of survival mode as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to transformation mode, which is what
Right.
we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and transformations, we're going all over the place. It's very mercurial, very rapid speed here. But transformation is a really interesting word. It really brings me back to the individuality. Individuality is very important. And how do we address individuality within ascension? That's the question that we're aiming to discuss. Because ascension, if we are really looking deeply into it, is all about oneness. It's about realizing the God self. It's about realizing the divine self and your sovereignty and all that stuff. But it's about becoming one again with all that is. With the knowing that we're all having an experience, right? And it's all about the experience and the awareness of that experience. So transformation leads me to think about how does that um, unfold in the ascension process? How does that help us within the ascension process?
Well, I go back to what, I said earlier when we first brought up this topic, is it seems to me that individuality is a stepping stone
Mm-hmm.
towards going back to oneness, you know. But I think, and this is something normally I think you would say, with individuality, there's a balance that needs to happen because individuality can very easily lead to an overabundance of ego.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I think is the tricky part, is to find that harmonic place
Mm-hmm.
where
Absolutely.
individuality exists but does not rule.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dance, and it's a really fascinating balancing act,
Yeah.
because it's so easy to go on either side of the spectrum. So easy. You can really flip flop, you know? So it's really fascinating to find that equilibrium and stay within that.
Well, that's why I think awareness is so key, because if you are continuously in a state of awareness,
Mm-hmm.
you can sort of decipher when things are out of balance or when perhaps you are leaning too much to one side or the other.
Awareness is where it's at. Absolutely.
We should
Absolutely.
make a shirt with that.
Oh, I definitely want to. Awareness is where it's at, because it's all
Okay.
about awareness, awareness and mastery,
Yeah.
self mastery. So that's the thing, right? Self mastery and self awareness, that's individuality, because it's the self, but the self is really one. If you go into the deeper, higher levels of consciousness, you realize that it's really one one whole consciousness, one whole experience, right? But it's from the individual parts that you get that one. And it's so key, because every single experience, every single perspective is so unique and so special within the big masterpiece of the puzzle.
Right. So it's almost as though you should embrace individuality,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily let it get out of control.
Well, the key is, if we're thinking about, self-awareness and self-mastery, the key is to keep the ego in check and you be in control of the ego as opposed to having the ego control you.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And if we're not in a constant place of awareness, which, I wonder actually how many people can actually be in that state of complete awareness at all times, especially when the 3D gets involved and you have to pay bills and you have to, pick up kids from school and you have to make lunches or buy lunch and eat it. It's so much. How aware could you actually be in those moments?
Well, I think it's a journey. It's a bit
Mm-hmm.
of a long road, and sometimes maybe you start with just being aware occasionally. But over time, it starts to, like anything else, you start to
Become
develop
second
patterns
nature.
and things.
Hmm.
Yeah, but having said that, I mean, we're here to experience individuality. We're here
Hmm.
to enjoy um, the ups and the downs too, and to learn from them, and to embrace all that that is, because there's a reason that we separated from oneness to come here to have this experience. And I think if you live in a constant place of just wanting the oneness all the time, then you're missing out on what you're here for.
I absolutely agree. As I'm listening to background music, it's in a New York minute, everything can change. It's amazing because, we're going through this ascension process, which is all about transformation and beginning to have a new way of life, a new template. We're building this template as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it is through the expansion and the transformational process that we're able to do that. And I feel like it's such a powerful and big task for us, and I'm like so honored to be part of it, you know.
Yeah, it's fascinating, really, just because we don't know exactly where we're headed. We don't know exactly how it's going to unfold, and minute by minute we're making decisions as to whether to be aware, whether to be loving, whether to be service to others. And in almost every moment you're making decisions that change what the fate of the future is. And I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm thinking physics here.
Uh-oh.
I mean, I'm not getting into physics right now,
Yeah,
but
please don't.
no. But, like the whole thing is about embracing the totality of the all.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think actually what you just said really, kind of sparked something for me, because I think there has to be love of individuality, but there also cannot be fear of oneness, because we spend so much time in this 3D wanting to be unique, wanting to stand out, wanting to be special, wanting to wear things that make us look a certain way or seem a certain way. We do all of this to create this individuality. But I think for some people there's a fear of truly being connected to everything and everyone, because we all have our own misconceptions about different things. And if you truly recognize the connections between all things, then suddenly your perceptions of everything changes, and the individuality that you have spent so long trying to build doesn't mean as much.
Very interesting. You know, as you're talking, I'm thinking about my birth chart.
Okay.
And, you know, I think that I feel like ego is such a huge part of my life and awareness of that ego
Hmm.
because I feel it's one of the biggest lessons that I'm here to, in this lifetime, understand and develop from, if that makes sense. When I was younger, I felt that it would be so much easier if, honestly, if there was oneness, right? So that no one was really an individual, but everyone felt the same way, said the same thing, you know, like no separation at all. So I grew up thinking and feeling that that would be my utopian, my heaven, and what I was aiming to anchor here on earth. And now I'm really dealing with embracing my individuality and embracing everyone else's individuality and seeing the beauty in the differences.
Hmm.
And, you know, I've been through this cycle of looking at the individuality for about, I would say like 20 years. But I wonder how long before we can experience that on a uniform way. We can experience that level of oneness, you know, because I feel that is what ascension is about. Ascension is about becoming one again.
Okay. I mean, I agree with that vision and how amazingly beautiful and enjoyable that would be, but don't you think it would get boring after a while?
Yeah, I absolutely think that it might get boring, but this is the thing. And yes, it would be boring and it would be peaceful. That's the thing. I'm concentrating on the peace that comes with that,
Hmm.
because there's no discord, you know, because now there's no duality if there's oneness, you know. Right now, in this roller coaster that we've been traveling for eons, it's about duality and it's about like embracing the lows because then you have the pleasure of feeling and experiencing the highs, you know. So it's you have to have both, otherwise there is no contrast.
Hmm.
And obviously individuality and oneness, right? You have to have individuality unless you go back into oneness. Does that even make sense?
Yes. Okay. I
Does
follow
it?
that. Yes, I follow that for sure. I
Yeah.
guess I kind of feel that there's just a lot of enjoyment in the expansion part, in the growth part, in the facing of challenges, overcoming of challenges. You know,
Yeah.
I think that there's just something really fun about that, even though possibly at times when you're in the midst of that, it may not feel fun, but there's
And
something really um,
well,
inspirational.
what wouldn't be fun? Like it's I feel like the not fun part would be relinquishing control be in within the transformation process. Because listen, ascension's happening whether you are aware of it or not,
Mhm.
whether you're awake to it or not. It's happening on a grand scale. We're all ascending. The earth itself is ascending. Every single planet, every single dimension, we're all ascending. Okay.
But
So
do you think, I mean, just to play devil's advocate here for a
mhm,
second, I mean, there are a lot of people who don't know anything about this, they don't believe anything about this.
mhm.
I mean, what if their thoughts are shaping their reality and their reality is nothing like this, is nothing about ascension?
That's absolutely true.
So would those people in fact be a part of ascension, or would those people just continue to exist in their 3D every day, keep going around the way that they are? Or would
Mm.
they still be roped into ascension even though they have no sense of it, belief in it, understanding of it, care, concern of it, or anything?
So now we're getting into the physics part of it again.
I'm just throwing it out there. I don't have the answer. I'm not I'm not trying to say that I do. These are the thoughts that run through my head
So
sometimes.
here's the thing. Did you ever read the books Choose Your Own Adventure?
I used to love those books.
Yeah, right. So
Are we aging ourselves now?
I think we might we might be,
Okay.
but there was a reason why like my attention for Choose Your Own Adventure book was so heightened, because it would come into play now, because that's exactly what is happening in a grand scale. Now we can talk about those people that choose not to ascend. In one way, they are ascending. That's one view, because we're really talking about different angles and different perspectives here.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still ascending, whether they are aware of it or not. The other view of it is they are still creating their own reality. And in their view, they're not ascending. Do you see? Like, it's just different perspectives and different angles. We're all fractals. And I think that might be getting too deep here, but the fractals, if you look at like artwork, for example,
Mm-hmm.
when you look at a
Like
piece
Monet?
of, or any kind of anything that has any geometrical patterns, which is probably everything, but if you look at a more abstract artwork, you really can change the whole look by just moving to the side and looking at the work from a different viewpoint, from a different angle. These are different aspects. Back to astrology, here we go. These are all different aspects. It's just a different view. It's a different point of view and sight. But it's you changing the perspective that you're able to see that. If you wish to see that, that's the key. And that's the individuality that we still have. We're still creating our own reality by the thoughts that we have, by the feelings that we choose to feel, because we're not our thoughts and we're not our feelings. And most people are not even aware of that. And that could be a different topic for another show.
Okay. I mean, I'm also just thinking about this idea that if people are not aware of ascension, interested in ascension, focused on it, thinking about it, believing it, how does it really make sense that they should or would be in receipt of the benefit of that versus people who are actively working towards ascension and for ascension all the time?
Because this is where the individuality comes in. Just because something is happening on a larger scale, there's still individuality. There's still a different perspective. There's still a different experience. And that experience matters to the grand scale. It's not about you working for it and you benefiting from something that you didn't work for or did work for or whatever. It's really about the grand scale. It's about the masterpiece. It's not about the individuals at all. It's really about the masterpiece. It's about the bigger picture. It's about the higher perspective, which everything in totality is one.
But if we come into this 3D experience with free will and with the ability not only for choice but also to manifest whatever it is that we
have to talk about free will. Probably not today, but
separate conversation.
yeah, I mean, do we really have free will?
Yeah, that's a biggie.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, that sort of just kind of goes into one of the things that I think can be perplexing for me sometimes, is that
Mm-hmm.
idea that which is it really? Is it a combination of the two that I just don't have personal clarity on, or is there something, a piece that's missing? But that's one of the things for me that I haven't completely wrapped my head around, for sure, because I
Mm-hmm.
do believe that ascension is happening.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of, my personal feeling at this point, and is just that it's happening at different levels for everyone.
Well, absolutely. But here's the thing, and this is how we can look at it from like a larger perspective. Years ago, time was not as fast as it is now.
Correct.
And regardless if someone's awake, if you want to label people as awake or asleep or aware or not aware or 3D or 5D, it doesn't really matter because time itself is different. Time is being experienced at a rapid pace now, like
Mm-hmm.
totally fast.
Yeah. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I know it was pretty crazy. Like we're experiencing 24 hours in 16 or something like that.
Well, I don't even know about that, but I certainly do know that some people, when I was talking about it back in like 2000, I think it was like 2010, 2011, I was talking about how time was feeling a little different to me. And someone said, "Oh, that's because you're, older and you're not a child anymore." And I'm like,
Okay.
that's no, I said, "That's interesting, but that's not the case because then children wouldn't be feeling this."
Right.
And children are saying to their parents, "Mom, it feels like it was just Monday, but it's not Monday." You know what I'm saying? Like time is just warped to a different level. And that's because of ascension. Because 3D is really the space-time continuum. Actually, that's the 4D, but we're not going to get into that. And the fact that we're ascending, we're really it's like wormholes in a way. We're going through like a wormhole in order to ascend.
When you say we, do you mean the planet as a
Mm-hmm.
whole?
As a whole.
Mm. Yeah, it's really stuff that you could just sit and ponder for hours, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, for sure.
And I think the fact that we get to sit and watch these things and enjoy the awe of it is in and of itself kind of a gift, because I don't know how many other generations of people have been able to witness this kind of thing and have a sense of it and feel inspired by it, but also be on this journey where bits and pieces of it are coming in, and they're trying to figure it out, and understanding that it's this great big picture of something beautiful, but maybe not having all the pieces. And so there's something quite exciting and interesting about all that.
Well, it's different. It's definitely, I don't know why different came up, but it's definitely a brand new experience for all of us, the earth included, because this is a co-creation. And we have to remember everything is consciousness. The earth has consciousness. We have consciousness. We are all part of consciousness. We're all part of the one Godhead, the one consciousness, And we have to really take into consideration that it's a brand new time for all of us as we transform. And, you know, even people who might not be so aware of what's happening and what is happening with ascension and the transformation that we're going into, or that we've been on for a few years now, they're experiencing physical symptoms that
Yes.
they really can't they really can't conceptualize. They don't really know why they're feeling the way they do. They don't know why their bodies are reacting the way they are, you know, and they're not even into this ascension world, you know. But that goes to show you it's happening no matter whether you're in it or not. It's happening on a large scale, regardless of what they individually want to create within their own individual reality.
Right.
Because that still is happening until there is just oneness. We are still experiencing things on an individual scale also.
So do you think ascension has caused more people to awaken, or more people awakening has helped move ascension forward?
Both.
Okay. Kind of like what came first, chicken or the egg kind of
Right,
thing.
exactly. Both.
I just felt the need to pose that question.
The chicken or the egg. Let's talk about that next time.
Yeah, that should be a much viewed episode. Oh, as always, it's been a lot of fun. Hopefully we've inspired some deep thought for some people.
Yeah, hopefully. I know I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying my synapses going buck wild.
All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to connecting with you next time.
Thank you.